Hello friends, welcome to the fifth and the final part of the series on how Britain stole over 45 trillion from Bharat. So without further ado, let's dive into it. So in the last part, we had a look at the situation till 1833 and a little bit after 1833 when East India Company lost its monopoly and the floodgates were open to British planters, investors and missionaries to kind of come into India and do whatever they wanted to do. So there was a little bit of change after 1850s, especially. So the old mechanism of taking, goods directly and then selling them off at a high profit and paying people out of taxes wouldn't work as it was. So they had to innovate a way of skimming the entire profit and the money from India without it being very obvious. So I'll discuss this very interesting mechanism. So the British are quite innovative in these things. So we'll have a look at this mechanism. Okay, so but we'll first have a look at some key characters. Okay, so let's say key character right at the bottom is Ram Khilawan. He's a farmer in UP or Bihar, and he's growing opium for his British overlords through intermediaries, through either zamindars or the extremely cruel British planters. Then you have intermediary or a dalal, like the Tatas. So I've just put Jamshedji Tata as a representation here. So this photo is of Jamshedji Tata, but it could be anyone. So you have a lot of dalals, especially in the port cities of Mumbai and Calcutta. Then you have got the whole world, which is pretty much where Indian goods were exported. So by this stage, after 1860s, it was mostly raw material, so cotton, opium, indigo, and so on. And the key trading partners were Europe, China, Americas, Australia, and so on. So these are the three main characters, but then you have got another key character, which is the British Crown. So we can't forget this because India was occupied by the British Crown at that point of time. And then you have got some side characters in this movie. So one side character is this photograph is of the Writers' Building in Calcutta. This was known as the Central Secretariat, and this housed the treasury. So Calcutta was the capital of India till 1911 when it was moved to Delhi. And shortly the British Empire came to an end because Delhi has got pretty bad vastu. So empires with Delhi as a capital don't tend to last very long. And then you have got an exchange bank in India. So this is the Bank of Bengal in Calcutta. So I believe this was an exchange bank as well, but you had them in Mumbai and other major metropolitan cities. Now, so we have got a total of six key characters. So we just understand how this process worked. So first, we have got Ram Khilaman who sells goods to Jamshedji or the Dalal on the promise of payment at a future date. Now, what the middleman does or the Dalal does is he exports goods to different countries around the world. Okay, but the interesting thing is he doesn't get paid by them directly because what has happened is that the British Crown has or the Secretary of State in Council. So this was the person who had a cabinet rank and who had roughly 15 kind of officials assisting him, and he was above the viceroy. Above the viceroy. So viceroy, sorry, slurring a bit, Viceroy ruled India and he reported to the Secretary of State in Council SSIC in London, who then reported to the Parliament and so on. But it was SSIC who, for all practical matters, was actually controlling India from London with his team of 15-20 officials. So, what the SSIC or the Secretary of State in Council had done was they had manipulated the rupee pound exchange in such a way that it was not profitable for the exporters, so for the importers to send gold or currency directly to India. Okay, so what they did was they devised a mechanism where the importer would have to deposit gold, silver, or currency, their own currency, with the Secretary of State in UK. And what they would do in exchange for this deposit, they would uh, they would give them what was known as a CB or a Council Bill of Exchange, and this was in rupees. Okay. Now the exchange rate between the pound sterling and the rupee was very finely manipulated. So you would always get a better deal if you deposited with the Secretary of State in Council. And then what the importer would do is, once he had the Council Bill of Exchange, either via telegraph or by post, he would send it to the dalal, Jamshedji in this case. And this would be payment in Council bills. Now what Jamshedji would do was he would go to the nearest exchange bank and he would cash the Council bills with the exchange bank in India. Obviously, the exchange banks wouldn't give him cash straight away. First, they had to send the council bill to the treasury in India, in Calcutta and later Delhi, to get it redeemed in cash. Once the treasury confirmed, everything was fine, they would pay. So this is where the interesting thing starts, and this is the old pattern. They would pay from the taxes collected in India. So they wouldn't get any money from the UK. They would be paying Indians from their own taxes. So again, the old concept is still there, getting goods for free, but in a different way. And then the bank would give cash in exchange for the council bills. Obviously I have highlighted this in red because it is all tax money. And then the dalals would take a hefty commission, and whatever little was left, it would be paid to Ram Khilawan down the line. And I have shown this as a dotted line just to indicate that it was very minor. So it's payment which is minus commission. And there was also one interesting thing is, if there was any surplus, it was usually sent by the treasury to UK, to the Secretary of State in Council, as expenditure abroad. So I've discussed this in the previous episodes. Expenditure abroad was usually in the form of home charges, and this used to cover everything. So Britain's wars abroad, Britain's wars in India, outside India, laying telegraph lines from the UK to India, and so on and so forth. So everything was billed as expenditure, and this was adjusted, and I'll show you the graphs in the next couple of slides, to always make sure that India's export surplus was either equalized by expenditure abroad, or the expenditure abroad always stayed little more than India's export surplus. So basically we ran a deficit, and deficit means we were in debt to the UK, while the situation was exactly the reverse. Okay, so let's go on to the next slide. And this data again I've got from Professor Patnaik's article, and you can see the table in that article. So I've just kind of graphically mapped it out. So this shows India's merchandise export surplus from 1833 till 1937. Now the merchandise export surplus is calculated as exports minus imports. So obviously if you are exporting more than you are importing, this will always be positive number. And this also includes gold. While this is calculated, the imports also include the gold imports. Now gold imports are typically again classified into two. One is a commodity gold, so typically gold which is brought into the country for retail consumption, so jewelry and so on and so forth. And another is financial gold, which is bought by the treasury, by the government. So even in today's date, every reserve bank, including Reserve Bank of India, the Bank of England, all of these have their own gold deposits, which are kept safely under lock and key. And this is how, and that is the amount of gold you have is one of the parameters of the strength of your currency as well, because it's backed by gold. It's not always the case, especially after 1970s when the Bretton Woods Agreement was scrapped. But till that point, the amount of gold the government had was definitely one of the key strengths behind their currency. Okay, so we can see we always had a merchandise export surplus. So sometimes it kind of shoots up. So 1863-65, it's this is in crores of rupees. So it's around 38 crores of rupees, and this was right after the American Civil War. So the American South was, kind of completely destabilized, and the production, plantations, everything went out of whack. So India became one of the key exporters of cotton. And within a few years it rationalizes, but it always keeps going up. There's a now massive dip around 1920 where we are in negative. And one of the key reasons for this was India paid 100 million pounds as a gift to the UK. Now, no Indian knew about this, so we had no idea we were paying 100 million after the First World War. So that kind of explains the massive dip. Otherwise, we can see till that point, even while the war was going on, we had a surplus of almost 87 crores of rupees. Okay, so this kind of goes on up and down, up and down. So this was always adjusted, and the next graph shows how it was adjusted. So this is what I call stripping the profit, and the red line shows expenditure in England. So this was expenditure abroad, what I was talking about, home charges and everything else, and the global export surplus. Now the global export surplus is calculated. Global export surplus is calculated minus the gold brought into the country, minus the imports. So it will always show low value, but Professor Utsa Patnaik has made a point that even that calculation is not proper, and the export surplus is underestimated. So this would have been more, because apparently they mixed up the commodity gold and the financial gold in when calculating the imports. So you can see that the expenditure in England always very closely follows on, and whenever there is a cumulative increase in the global export surplus of India, the expenditure in England magically rises up and it strips out, thus driving the global export surplus of India into the negative. And you can see this almost at every point of time. Eventually it catches up. So you might have a short spike in global export surplus, but it's always kind of matched up and overtaken eventually by the expenditure in England. And you can see in 1899, 1901, you have this global export surplus at around little less than 14 million pounds. So this is a million pounds. The previous one is crores of rupees, 14 million pounds, and this the expenditure in England has shot up to 17 million pounds. So it always outpaced. So what happened was India was always in debt, and just to an example, in the period 1898 to 1913, we had a surplus of rupees 551 crore, but this was offset by debits of rupees 625 crore. This yields a deficit of around 74 crore rupees. So you can see how big a stripper was applied. Okay, so some of the key events, I'm just looking to see if I have missed anything. Okay, so 1890-91, so there was again an expenditure on a large scale. The expenditure shot up because India was moved to the gold standard, so a lot of gold was imported into India, and obviously that was billed to our account. So what I would really encourage you to do is go and have a look at Professor Patnaik's article, quite informative. There's more stuff in there about how this calculation was done, but I'm not going into those details. If there's interest, I'll create another video where I just discuss how they came to the calculation. Okay, folks, so that's it for this time, and I hope you have liked the video. If you have liked, please do remember to like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.